From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Tyler Pelly. Tonight, we take a look at stories from our Washington bureau, DC politics through an Arizona lens, reports on efforts to fight opioid addiction, and veterans elected to represent Arizona in Congress.
2 days after Governor Doug Ducey declared a health emergency to deal with the state's spiraling opioid crisis, a top aide was in Washington today to talk about the state's strategy. Cronkite News reporter Alex Valdez is live in our Washington bureau with the story.
Deputy Chief of Staff Danny Seiden brought a sobering message today to a panel of experts at the American Enterprise Institute and some suggestions on how states can deal with the opioid problem that killed 790 people in Arizona last year. Seiden said one way to deal with the issue of opioid abuse and addiction is through education and prevention, stopping the problem before it starts.
Including dedicating more and more time and policy research towards prevention, not just treatment, because you got to fight this on all fronts. And a lot of our ideas have been around treatment, which we're not going to give up on, but we have to get to prevention as well.
But he said the state is moving aggressively to deal with the problem that it is currently facing.
Steps that Governor Ducey has taken to help protect Arizonans, signing into law bills that allow naloxone to be more readily available so that we can reverse overdoses. And of course, most recently declaring a state of emergency.
Other speakers on the panel said one way the federal government can help is by shifting more power to the states. Includes giving states more flexibility to use Medicaid funding for substance abuse, treatment, and prevention. And for Arizona, it could include using Medicaid funds for prevention and education at the junior high school level.
I think what we need is education, and so the key to prevention is education. So resources and more flexibility in how we can use some dollars to address this problem in a way that benefits Arizonans.
Seiden said that is just one part of the state's approach.
The treatments that we're doing, whether it's our Vivitrol private pilot program, whether it's alone, including the Angel drop-off, all those things are going to continue on forward. This is something we're fighting on all fronts.
Seiden also said that the need for limitation on access to prescription opioids, noting that millions of prescriptions written in Arizona last year led to more than 2 overdose deaths per day. In Washington, Alex Valdez, Cronkite News.
And the dangers of opioids extend to more than just users. Federal officials warned that a powerful synthetic form of the drug can also present a threat to police and first responders. That was actually the warning today from the Justice Department and the Drug Enforcement Administration. Cronkite News reporter Emma Lockhart is live in our DC bureau with the story. Emma?
The synthetic opiate fentanyl is one of the leading causes of the opioid epidemic, but opioid users are not the only ones who are affected. I was at a DEA press conference earlier today where I learned how law enforcement officers are also susceptible.
This is in every county, this is in every community in our country.
50 times more potent than heroin and gaining popularity, fentanyl poses a great risk to users and those who come in contact with it. DEA officials are warning law enforcement and first responders of the dangers.
A few milligrams of fentanyl, maybe the equivalent of 5 or 6 or 7 grains of table salt, can kill you.
Ingesting, inhaling, even absorbing the drug through the skin can lead to an overdose. 2 detectives from Atlantic County, New Jersey suffered from just opening up a small bag of a powdered form of fentanyl and inhaling it.
Felt like you were dying. You couldn't breathe. Very disoriented. And everything you did was exaggerated in your mind, I guess. It was the most bizarre feeling that I never, ever would want to feel again, to be honest with you.
Cases like this have occurred throughout the country.
Of all of this is national awareness. This is truly of epidemic proportion.
The DEA is encouraging local training and education to help protect those handling the drug.
Among warnings from officials today was also a reminder that police dogs are also at risk, and in some instances what looks like heroin could actually be pure fentanyl. In those cases, officers should always assume the worst. In Washington, Emma Lockhart, Cronkite News.
With arrests by Immigration and Customs Enforcement up sharply this year, immigration advocates are renewing their plea not to divide families through deportation, especially as Father's Day nears. That was the message delivered today on Capitol Hill. Cronkite News reporter Noelle Lilly in our Washington Bureau has more on this story.
Fathers often play an important role in the lives of their children, but advocates say for the children of immigrants, that role is being taken away.
13-year-old Joel Massey only had one request for President Trump today in Washington. He says he just wants his dad back.
He said that he can't live the dream of a life in America with his family to stand beside him. I said that he has to live in fear of persecution. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Massey's father, Arino Massey, was deported last month after living in the U.S. for 16 years. That's why today the immigration reform group America's Voice teamed up with New Jersey Representative Frank Pallone to speak at the Capitol about the families left behind when a father is deported. The group says this issue affects families nationwide, especially in states like Arizona.
Well, Arizona is often called ground zero in the immigration debate. So Arizona is disproportionately affected because it has a large immigrant population that's now being directly impacted by these cruel policies.
According to the Urban Institute and Migration Policy Institute, when a father is deported, the family's income is likely to drop an average of 73%.
The group called on President Trump and the Department of Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly to stop separating families.
Approach Father's Day, we wanted to take note of the fact that this administration is targeting low priority people, dads who are providing for their family, who have never committed a crime.
The group said that they hope to eventually be able to create an easier path to legal citizenship.
To I-246 stays of removal.
The advocate's plea could be a tough sell in Washington. Elsewhere on the Capitol today, the acting director of ICE said that although the ICE targets illegal immigrants, any kind of illegal immigrants are subject to arrest as well. Live in Washington, Noelle Lilly, Cronkite News.
And despite years of ongoing military conflict, veterans continue to make up an increasingly small share of the total U.S. population, and that's true for members of Congress as well. Cronkite News reporter Emma Lockhart is in our Washington bureau and tells us why that has some people concerned.
30 years ago, there were 287 veterans in Congress. Today, there are only 99. The decrease has some concerned, asking whether lawmakers who haven't served are qualified to make military decisions. But not Ben Tweedy.
You know, take John McCain, for example, prisoner of war, yet one of the biggest war hawks out there right now.
Tim Spohr, the director of national defense at the Heritage Foundation, says lawmakers with no military service could benefit from some.
They lack, probably a good understanding of what the military is like and the decision to commit U.S. forces into combat. It would be helpful if they had some service.
According to the data from the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives Historical Office, 80 current House members and 19 senators are veterans, a rate of 18.5%. Arizona does slightly better, with 3 veterans in our 11-member delegation. Senator John McCain, along with Representatives Ruben Gallego and Martha McSally, have served. Spohr says the biggest reason for the decrease is simply because not as many people serve anymore. Spohr says he doesn't think this trend is going away anytime soon. For Tweedy, who was in Washington for a Veterans for Peace rally, he hopes lawmakers direct the country in a peaceful direction, whether they have served or not.
Anyone who does serve in office of a country who claims to support freedom, to support prosperity, needs to have an understand of war, needs to have an understanding of the horrors that come with war.
Reporting in Washington, Emma Lockhart, Cronkite News.
Another day, another 83 cents. That's what women in Arizona might be saying tomorrow on National Equal Pay Day, a day that highlights the gap in earnings between men and women. Reporter Anthony Marroquin is in Washington today with new numbers on the decades-old fight for equal pay.
It's been over 4 decades since Michael Lieber started her fight for women's pay equity.
In college, that I would talk about the double standard. So I had the activist attitude back then.
Still, she doesn't see an end to the struggle anytime soon.
The estimates of when the gender wage gap will close keep extending.
New numbers from the National Partnership for Women and Families shows that women still made just 80 cents for every dollar a man made in 2015, a rate that has changed little in the last 10 years. Advocates say the stubbornness of the gap could be driven by a built-in bias in society.
In a perfect world, we'd have fathers and mothers that are responsible for their children in an equal way, but we still have more single parents, head of households that are women.
In the House, Congresswoman Martha McSally is leading a group to talk about what Congress can do to help the problem.
We've already talked about some of them, like increasing the child care tax credit. That's kind of a no-brainer. That's a federal level issue, and it hasn't been increased in years.
While McSally says the law needs to be updated, at least one Arizona business owner said last week that it's not just about the money.
Life is just too short to miss out on important events, even if it's just Johnny's first recital or Maria's first basketball game.
Despite the slow pace of progress, those small gains give Lieber hope for the future.
Frustration when one works on an issue this long, but you do see steps being taken.
At 78, she plans to continue the fight until equality is won.
I hope now to help for my granddaughters.
In Washington, Anthony Marroquin, Cronkite News.
For any startup companies looking for growth, securing venture capital is a crucial step. However, not everyone has equal access. Reporter Zi Zeng shows us how entrepreneurs in Phoenix are taking the fight on themselves.
If this penny represents the approximately $220 million of venture capital invested in Arizona last year, then this is how much its neighbor California got. A total of over $58 billion.
Last year, 78% of venture capital went to 3 states.
And that's why veteran entrepreneur and founder of AOL, Steve Case, has embarked on his latest venture to help bring funding to capital-deprived cities and states. He calls the organization Rise of the Rest.
Why be part of somebody else's experiment if we've seen enough success out of the Bay Area, out of Silicon Valley, out of New York?
The need for a better startup environment has prompted entrepreneurs nationwide to take up the initiative. Jonathan Cottrell is the founder of ESPHX, a community that brings the innovators of all walks in Phoenix.
And so I think what happened is we finally started connecting and collaborating more as a community, as all of these disparate islands, if you will, and really coming together as one metropolitan and saying, let's build Phoenix.
Last year, Rise of the Rest came to Phoenix and hosted a Shark Tank-style competition. The winner, a Scottsdale-based medical device startup, took home the prize of $100,000. Cottrell said the city of Phoenix is also active in helping to create a friendlier environment for startups.
We want to get everybody who has ideas, get them on the playing field and give them that shot.
In Washington, D.C., Zi Zeng, Cronkite News.
there's something else that's been dividing Mexico and the U.S. Debate over the future of the North American Free Trade Agreement. Arizona Senators John McCain and Jeff Flake have been highlighting Arizona's benefits from NAFTA in the recent months. The senators say Arizona's exports to Canada and Mexico have increased by $5.7 billion, or 236%, since NAFTA took effect. Mexico is Arizona's #1 trading partner, and that relationship directly supports more than 100,000 Arizona jobs. According to the International Trade Administration, trade with Mexico accounted for 40% of our Arizona's exports to foreign markets. In 2015, that total was $9.2 billion. The renegotiation of NAFTA was a key discussion point today in Washington during a visit from the head of the Bank of Mexico. Anthony Marroquin brings us the latest developments.
President Donald Trump and Mexico don't always see eye to eye, but leaders from the Bank of Mexico are saying they may agree on at least one thing. It's time to renegotiate NAFTA.
A lot has changed in Mexico between '94 and today.
Changes that Bank of Mexico Governor Agustin Carstens says makes many part of the North American Free Trade Agreement simply outdated.
You take, for example, the energy sector. The energy sector was completely put aside in NAFTA.
It's more than just energy in President Donald Trump's eyes. He's been an outspoken critic of the entire agreement.
The fact is, NAFTA, whether it's Mexico or Canada, is a disaster for our country.
Carson said tensions would still run high throughout the renegotiation process, but that Mexican officials are willing to be part of those discussions.
The position that Mexico has, and that's why I think that, and in a way slowly I think that this is what is being reflected, is that we look forward to the revision of NAFTA.
After a long campaign promising to be tough on immigration, President Donald Trump has been relatively silent about what his plans are for those with deferred action for childhood arrivals. Reporter Anthony Marroquin took a look at how this silence has affected a specific group of professionals protected by the program.
The end of the year rush is in full swing in Yadira Garcia's high school class.
It's just like,
But unlike most teachers, there's something else at the back of her mind.
You have a stable job, you know, you have the house, like you want a house now type of thing, and then just like not knowing.
Garcia is one of an estimated 1,000 DACA eligible individuals in Arizona working in teaching related jobs.
The not knowing what's going to happen with that stability, that really sort of like just irked me a lot.
Advocates say these teachers are more than just instructors, going beyond the curriculum to provide comfort for teenagers dealing with immigration issues themselves.
Being able to have someone who says, hey, I might not understand your whole story, but I have lived a similar experience. It allows for people to feel connected and not to feel isolated.
But advocates on the other side argue that we can't get stuck on emotions and that unfortunately, DACA has to go.
No one can say that that's a good thing for these DACA recipients. The thing is, though, it would go back to what is legal.
Roy Beck of Numbers USA said repealing DACA would do more good than harm because immigrant workers drive down wages for everyone.
Here's the question. Is it right for the people of Arizona to get teachers for less than market rate?
For Garcia, just the uncertainty of her status means she has to be ready for the worst.
I'll be fine, but at the same time, it's like, if it happens tomorrow, like, then I have to have this plan for me from now until December because I wouldn't be able to teach.
In Washington, Anthony Marroquin, Cronkite News.
As you probably know, today is tax day. But do you know just how much Arizona taxpayers are contributing to the federal government? Reporter Anthony Marroquin is in Washington tonight with those numbers.
When accounts are settled tonight, Arizonans will have paid over $11,000 in federal income tax. Over 50% of that will have gone to just two areas, 30% to healthcare and nearly a quarter to defense.
We have a big emphasis in my head, I thought, on law enforcement, so I thought that was going to be our #1 expenditure.
Noninez says she was surprised to learn how the federal government spends her tax dollars.
I'm surprised that education is so low, but I'm glad that we're spending a lot of money on healthcare.
What she's not surprised to learn, Arizonans sent 20% less in federal taxes than the national average last year. That's according to the National Priorities Project. And although this may sound like a relief for your wallet, experts say it's more complicated than that.
You take a state like Florida or Arizona, which has a lot of retirees, they're probably going to send less payroll tax to the federal government.
In Arizona, that means the average $11,264 tax bill is about 20% less than the $14,000 collected nationally. Josh Bivens of the Economic Policy Institute said the amount of federal tax dollars Uncle Sam takes from each state is determined by two factors: how many people are in the workforce and the income level of its residents. But that doesn't mean poorer states get less of a say in how those tax dollars get spent.
The states themselves can decide how much flows their way. So a classic example is the Medicaid program. And so basically, the more generous a state is with its own state-level Medicaid program, the more federal dollars they get.
I think education and health should be our number one priority.
Ness says given how little comparatively Arizona already pays in federal taxes, she wishes more would go toward education. But like many others, she's not sure whether she wants to be charged more.
I don't want more money to be taken out of my paycheck, but then again, would I notice it? I don't know.
One federal agency that could be getting more of those tax dollars next year is the Department of Homeland Security. In his first address since taking office, Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly spelled out the department's successes and challenges today. Cronkite News reporter Z Zung tells us how Kelly plans to protect the U.S. from international threats.
By public officials who have no idea.
A confident and sometimes combative Secretary Kelly laid out his vision for securing the homeland that includes tighter controls on illegal immigration and stiffer vetting process at airports. Kelly said the department is looking to stop illegal immigration before it starts, looking for an economic solution with Mexico and several other Central American nations.
They lack the economic opportunity. That's why the vast majority of them leave. So we're not just trying to keep them away, we're trying to give them a reason to stay home.
Despite the challenges he faces, Kelly said his agency's actions are often misunderstood by the public. He reminded the audience today that his mission is to enforce the laws and not make them.
If lawmakers do not like the laws that we enforce, that we are charged to enforce, that we are sworn to enforce, then they should have the courage and the skill to change those laws. Otherwise, they should shut up and support the men and women on the front lines.
For the past 2 years, the Department of Homeland Security has finished last in employee rankings of the best federal agencies to work for. Kelly said part of the problem is the increasing work-related stress his officers face as a result of the political battles in Washington.
For too long, the men and women of my department have been political pawns. They've been asked to do more with less and less and less.
In Washington, D.C., Z Zung, Cronkite News.
A bill supported by Senator John McCain is looking to replace your dollar bills with dollar coins. Our reporter Z Zung has the story from Washington.
I think Congress is
to former Arizona Representative Jim Colby and others in the Senate briefing today, turning dollar bills into coins makes more sense.
That the dollar coin is good for taxpayers, consumers, businesses, and the environment.
According to a 2012 report by the Government Accountability Office, the switch would save the government over $150 million per year. Besides, Thomas Schatz says it's also good for the environment.
Each year, approximately 3.2 billion $1 bills are sent to landfills, where they create millions of pounds of unnecessary waste, while the coins are 100% recyclable.
Aaron Klein, former Deputy Assistant Treasury Secretary, said, another big inefficiency in our currency system is the continued production and circulation of pennies.
Penny production is up 58% since 2012. Does anybody in this room need 58% more pennies than you needed 5 years ago? Why are we making these? GAO's estimated that 2/3 of all pennies are out of circulation and sit in jars.
However, Colby said change is not easy.
As I mentioned earlier, there's the inertia factor. People are just, it's hard to get people to change the currency. There are special interests that are involved, those that manufacture the paper that is used in the currency, those that manufacture the metal slugs that are used for pennies, that resist this kind of change.
And Congress is also resistant to change. Jim Colby first introduced a dollar coin bill in 1991. In Washington, D.C., Z Zung, Cronkite News.
A local choir performs in Washington as part of a national concert, but for this Glendale group, the odds were stacked even higher. Cronkite News reporter Alex Valdez tells us how this choir managed to overcome an unusual obstacle.
The Sounds of the Southwest Singers of Glendale is a community choir, much like any other, with one crucial difference. Their director and co-founder is deaf.
A lot of their passion comes from knowing their director is hearing impaired. I think a part of that hearing impairment, they sing with enunciation. They sing with expression.
Daller's parents discovered very early in his life that he was 90% deaf, a disability Daller has turned to an ability.
I think I developed an ear for music and being able to play songs by ear. My parents discovered that when I was very young.
Despite his hearing impairment, Daller says he has the gift of perfect pitch.
You don't have to carry a pitch pipe around. You just sing a D, D, and they're here and they know the first note of the song.
Matt has directed the Sounds of the Southwest Choir for the past 6 years. He has taken his choir to many places all around the world, which has led them here at the National Memorial Day Festival in Washington, D.C. Daller and his wife Leanne co-founded the 150-member choir in 2010 as a way to give back to their community.
I'm very, very proud to be a part of the Sounds of the Southwest Singers, and along with my wife Leanne, we are leading this group to great things.
Members of the choir say their musical mission is to give the audience a way to connect to the music.
It is a way for me to connect with other people, and we bring happiness to a lot of people as the people in the audience brings happiness to us.
Butler says Daller is a large part of the reason for that happiness.
If we didn't have Matt as our director, you realize how unique and special he is, and he get us to perform and sing our very best.
Reporting in Washington, Alex Valdez, Cronkite News.